Okay, welcome back. We're going to dive into this masterclass where I'm going to share with you the best food practices, lifestyle routines, essential oils, how we want to focus our yoga as much as we can in this time frame. And I'm all yours, so whatever questions you have, we'll set some time aside for questions as well. I want to really deliver something that will be useful to you so that this season you can think ahead. So often we wait until we get sick and then we're like, oh, I don't know what happened. I guess I'm run down. And because that's the thing, we really just catch viruses when we're weakened. Viruses are opportunists. So we need to have an environment where a virus where we're susceptible to it and where it could thrive. So Ayurveda is beautiful at preventative medicine. It's one of its, really strong suits because when we work preventatively and when we can really see day to day how we're out of balance. And one of the main things to notice for yourself is your digestion. All disease will begin on the physical level in the digestive tract. And a lot of things we ignore because maybe it's a little bit of constipation or a little bit of bloating or a little bit of loose stool or heartburn, and it maybe comes and goes, so we don't pay a lot of attention to it. However, over time, what happens is that imbalance will go out of your digestive tract into general circulation and then lodge itself. In Ayurveda, we call this kavaigunya, defective space. It will lodge itself in an area that you're weakened by. We all have, stronger parts of ourselves and weaker parts. So often illness will lodge itself in a place where we're predisposed to weakness. Maybe we've had an injury or an illness before, so it can become repetitive in nature. Or, people go through their life maybe living pretty hard and fast, and then eventually it catches up, right? Like we can't necessarily just keep overworking or staying in jobs or relationships where we're unhappy in, or staying in a self-identified place that is, I'm not good enough, I'm not deserving, all these things. And a lot of that is subconscious. So that's where it gets a little bit trickier. And that's really the work that I do with my clients, is looking at the subconscious beliefs, because that's the root cause of dis-ease and illness, is our subconscious beliefs. So until we can look at that, we can eat the best organic meals, we can live according to our dosha, which yes, we need to do that also. But if we're only looking at the external and looking at our food and daily routine and still kind of feeling like, why is nothing shifting? Or things might shift for a while and then we plateau again, I can almost guarantee that it's because we need to look at the underlying vibrational current that the disease is a match to within inside of us. And that could be a cold, right? Like that could be a common cold to anything, to autoimmune, to cancer, to chronic illness, any symptom. So this is Ayurveda looks at things a little bit differently. And hopefully it's an empowering place, not a disempowering place. Well, it's what you choose. I choose to see it as a very empowering place to go, oh, you mean I can expand who I think I am and feel more whole. Because when we're feeling whole, either the disease won't exist there because we're feeling whole, or we're feeling whole. So it doesn't matter if we're living with a physical dis-ease. Okay. So I'm just going to do a really quick overview of what the dosha is and why we're focusing on Vata this time of year. And then we're just going to dive right into the practicalities. If you're wanting more, my colleague and I wrote a book called Your Irresistible Life, which is literally a seasonal guide to Ayurveda and yoga. It's called Your Irresistible Life, 4 Seasons of Self-Care through Ayurveda and yoga practices that work. So that's a great resource for you if you want something that is seasonal and will guide you in this way. Okay, so the fall, the autumn time of year, Vata is heightened. You can see it when you look in nature, right? Think of what happens to the leaves on the trees. They start to turn color, fade, get dry, and then eventually fall off. We are a microcosm of the macrocosm. So what is happening out there is happening in here. We too are drying up and falling apart. No, not quite. But like, you know, the leaves spiral off the trees, the wind blows. This is fall. And the juncture of the seasons are a very delicate transition. This is often where symptoms can show up, or, you know, we can catch a cold or a flu in these seasonal junctures. So the transition is important. Like I was saying in yoga earlier, that we often ignore the transitions. We just think, oh, on to the next, on to the next. And so being mindful of how you are shifting as the seasons change. What do you need to do? Do you need to, on a practical level, you know, buy different foods, clear out your closets, pull out your winter woolies and big socks? But what about internally? You know, the exuberance of summer leaves us often overdoing, and then that can lead to burnout. The heat of the summer builds and builds and builds and builds. And what happens in the desert when there's a lot of heat? Things dry out, right? So summer is unfortunately, by the end of it, we're already starting to dry out because of the heat and the intensity. It absorbs all the moisture. We dry out, and then we go into the dry, rough, light, cold season. Sometimes people have like a reactive mucus, a reactive phlegm, because they are so dry that the body comes in with its intelligence saying, oh, let me try and balance that out. And I'm going to give you a, you know, runny nose or a phlegmy cough or something. That's not always the case. Sometimes that is more of a kapha imbalance, but I just want you to be aware of that can be the case, especially if you have a lot of vata or pitta in your constitution. Vata being earth and ether, and pitta being fire and a little bit of water. And I'm going to keep sipping my drink. So talking increases vata. It deranges vata. It vitiates vata. So I find when I teach, it's my vata goes high, and part of it's I'm excited. I really love this stuff and I love to share it with you all, but I can feel the energy goes high. So talking and coming actually into silence is one great way to conserve your energy. If you're feeling depleted, silence is a great way to conserve your energy. That might also be silencing like social media or TV or news intake, because those things also take our energy. So you want to look at where in your life, what is giving you energy, what is taking energy, and what is neutral. And your own thoughts can take energy, right? That's usually where we're most sort of susceptible to illness, is our own thinking and believing. Okay, so the qualities, and Ayurveda is a qualitative science. The qualities of Vata are dry, light, rough, mobile, clear, subtle. So it's wind, it's movement, it's irregularity. It's sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes digestion great, sometimes terrible. Sometimes, you know, proper elimination, sometimes constipation, sometimes diarrhea. It's all over the place, is Vata. So in Ayurveda, we say to bring balance, we need to bring the opposite qualities in. So think of warm, grounding, unctuous or oily, stabilizing, steadying, stillness, dense, like heavier, are going to be the things, the qualities in your foods, in your surroundings, in maybe your clothings, in the quality of your speech and conversation, that is going to help to ground the energy. So think of Vata as a tornado coming into the room. If a tornado came into the room you're in right now, like what would fly around? A lot would fly around. Things would go out of their proper place. Vata needs a container. Wind needs a container. Otherwise, wah! So many Vata individuals don't like routine. They're like, oh, I just like to be free and do what I want when I want. They have a hard time sticking to routine. Can anyone relate? So, well, not unfortunately, it just is what it is. Routine, waking and sleeping times, eating times, like get those bookends. And this is for everybody. Our body does love routine. And I'm not encouraging you to not be spontaneous. That's not what this is. This is setting yourself up with routines so that you can be spontaneous, so that you can, you know, once in a while stay up late and eat whatever you want. Like, but without the steady container, you're going to go out of balance more and more and more, and then eventually find yourself depleted or sick or what that might be. So think of it like you're just micro adjusting so that you stay on track. You're course correcting. And these are the refinements that you can course correct with. So routine is really big. For those of us, you know, in the Pacific Northwest, especially in darker, drearier parts of the world through the winter time, vitamin D3, liquid vitamin D3, get a good quality. The majority of people are deficient in vitamin D3. This will help with your mood. It will help. D3 affects so many functions of the body, our immune system. So, and if you're unsure, you can always go to the doctor and get your levels tested. But that's something that I would highly recommend. Of course, if it's contraindicated for something that you're doing or any medications that you're taking, please, this is not medical advice. This is just educational information in our session today. Natasha says, can you recommend a brand? You know what? I can't remember the name of the brand. Oh, there's a Canadian brand called AOR, I believe is a company that I really like their quality. I just go to Whole Foods and actually like ask my body what it wants. And I think that's the most recent one I bought is the AOR brand. And if you're in the States or other parts of the world, just go to your local health store and see what a good quality brand there is. Regular exercise, right? We know this, but are we doing it? And with Ayurveda, we would say over-exercising isn't good either. If you're a Pitta type and super intense and push, 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 go, 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 do, 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 you need to manage that, because an increase in Pitta over time, that Pitta intensity can lead to a Vata crash and a Vata burnout. We see this a lot with adrenal fatigue. Thyroid disorders. Okay, it's often begins with a fire imbalance, inflammation, too much intensity, and over a period of time, it's not sustainable, and it's not coming from a soul place. We're not living according to our dharma and our alignment. So that's really what takes us out of balance, when we're not listening. And if we're being lived through our subconscious fears and beliefs and making our choices from there, we will get sick, because our soul is like, wake up, hello, no, you're not here to be scared and afraid and anxious and depressed. That's not why you came here. So if that's what you're living and experiencing right now, there's a disconnect. It's not bad or wrong. It's just, let's look at that. Let's see what's not allowing you to be in alignment with who you came here to be. And you know, the time is now. The time is now. It always has been now, but now more than ever to wake up and to stop with the excuses of why we are perpetuating behaviors that are keeping us stuck or sick or feeling less than, or whatever we're experiencing that isn't magnificent. Let's look at what could be opened up in the energy field around that. Self-care routines in Ayurveda, we use a lot of oil. We say oil all 9 gates. So we, put oil in the eyes, in the ears, in the mouth, in the nose, in the anus, in oil everywhere. I'm not suggesting you do that necessarily all at once, but what you can do is work with Nasya oil. So Nasya is a medicated oil that you put in your nose. You can also just use like an organic sesame oil or organic ghee or even organic coconut oil. The medicated oil can be great because it has herbs that are cooked into it. However, just using an organic oil in your nostrils, I tend to do that. And I listen to my body when things start to feel dry, because in the summer I can feel the oiliness of Pitta, right, in my skin and in my body. But when I feel that change, then the oil in the nostrils in the morning and the evening. Now, traditionally, Nasya is a panchakarma. It's one of the 5 actions, and it would be quite a process to do that, where you lie back, and maybe you're even receiving this as a treatment as part of panchakarma, which is a whole other deep cleansing process. But what we can do, if you're like me, a little bit impatient and a little bit trying to like, I want to use the wisdom of Ayurveda, but I have to make it work in my life. What I do, partly because I've never been good at putting the drops in my nose myself. If you can do that, if you can lie back and put the drops in and wait there and really breathe that in, that is wonderful. The other option, which is not going to be as effective but still very powerful, is to put the oil onto your pinky finger and to put the oil into the rim of the nose. So that's what I would do morning and night, is oil the rim of the nose. If you have difficulties falling asleep, this is going to help. This is going to help pacify Vata. So oiling the nose or nausea is something I would highly recommend. It also prevents stuff from getting in. It acts like a barrier. So you're going to be less likely picking up viruses and pathogens that are, looking for a place to live. So that's called nasya, N-A-S-Y-A. That's one way that we use oil. Oil pulling is oil where we swish it around in the mouth. This is sort of a good any time of year practice. Like all of these Ayurvedic tools, if we do it once, we might not notice a big difference. We have to do these things consistently to actually get the sort of the best use out of them. Abhyanga is the practice of oil massage on the body. We want to use oil that is warm, not cold. It will be absorbed in a better way into the body. You do this before you have a bath or shower. So many of us are used to putting moisturizer on after. This is putting oil on before. So you would heat the oil up baby bottle style, not super hot, just warm enough that it feels nice going on the skin. If you can leave that oil on your skin for 5 minutes, maybe even up to 15, 20 minutes, but you don't want to get cold in between. So if you're in your house, you're putting oil on and then you're just like cold and naked, that's not going to be very successful because you don't want to catch a chill, because Vata is going to be elevated anytime it gets cold or chilled. And that's why, wearing a scarf or a hat, staying cozy, especially at the core in these more vulnerable areas of the head, of the throat, is going to be really important. But you put that oil on, you rub on the long bones, nice long strokes, on the joints, nice round strokes. You can even put it into your head. It is going to be an oily mess, but can be very grounding. And then when you get into the bath or shower, the warmth of the bath and shower will open the pores, which will help the oil to get absorbed in the body. Now, you don't want to soap that off. You don't want to now just take soap. That's going to take away the oil. And we want the oil. It's medicinal. It's really healthy. Sesame oil is warming, heating, and grounding. It's quite a heavy oil, so it is very good for Vata. You don't want to get the toasted kind because you'll smell like a stir fry. So just get the cold pressed organic sesame oil. And I buy that in the food section because it's cheaper than the beauty section of the health food store. So that's just like a little hack, which I think you get an organic sesame oil in the food section. It's great. It's food grade. Your body, your skin is the largest organ of your body. You're eating, you're digesting that oil through the skin, which is good. If you don't love sesame oil, or if you feel like you have a lot of heat in your body or going through menopause and have lots of hot flashes, coconut oil might serve you better. And if you do have a lot of kapha, a lot of earth and water in your constitution, and you're already quite oily, you won't need to do this practice as often. And you would need a lighter oil, perhaps something like safflower oil, sunflower oil, almond oil, I find is quite sort of light and neutral oil. Monica says, what do you do while you're waiting for the oil to sink in and before going in the shower? You could, if you have a nice warm bathroom, put a towel down on your toilet seat and do the alternate nostril breathing that we practiced through yoga. You could stretch, you could do some warm stretches, but yeah, you could meditate, but make sure you stay warm, right? The other thing, and here's like my full transparency again, because sometimes I'm not making enough time for these practices, my little quick fix is to have a bottle of oil in the shower that I'm already in the shower, the water's hot, it's running, and I'm just going to put that oil on my body. So that's, again, if you're like, I don't have time to do all this Ayurveda stuff, I would prefer that than nothing at all. And so that's my kind of philosophy for myself around that, is like, okay, this is my not ideal, but better than nothing scenario. Okay, so we want to find a way to integrate these practices so that they are actually effective and useful. Otherwise, it just becomes more information, which we don't need. We want practices that we're actually going to do and utilize. So think warm, not hot, but just warm. Natasha says, I stopped dry brushing because I'm too dry with the skin, especially in the winter. Yeah, so you might have heard of dry brushing and be like, oh my God, someone's raving about dry brushing. And it's like the newest, greatest thing. And here's the intelligence of Ayurveda. Instead of just jumping on a bandwagon, we have to think, is it for me? Is it the right season? Is it the right time of day? How much, how often? So dry brushing is drying. It's stimulating. It's great for moving the lymphatic system. However, is it going to be the best thing for you? If you continue dry brushing and you have a lot of Vata in your constitution throughout the fall and winter, you're probably going to create more dryness. Vata does not need to be stimulated. It is the most delicate of the doshas, and the nervous system is directly related to Vata. So if Vata is high, no matter what your predominant dosha is, the air and ether elements are affecting all of us at this season. So your Vata is going to be elevated. And if you already have a Vata constitution or Vata imbalance, which many people have an imbalance in Vata, even if it's not their predominant constitution, the fall time might definitely be feeling overwhelming, anxiety, like scattered, like, I don't know how to stay organized or grounded. Especially during this, time of world pandemics, and there's already a lot of Vata, the unknown, the unstable, the irregular is already permeating our collective consciousness. So that's up, like Vata is up right now for the majority of people. And Vata is the culprit of 80% of disease. It will move things out of their proper place in the mind body. So we really want to manage Vata. And now that we're moving into the Vata season, the Vata time of year, oh my goodness, more than ever, we need to be managing Vata. Otherwise, it will accumulate and create symptoms and disease. So those are some of the self-care practices of the oil, in the nostrils, the nasya. Abhyanga is what the body massage is called. We did the yoga, the alternate nostril breathing in class this morning, where we're balancing the hemispheres of the brain. The yoga postures that we focus on are things that are massaging, compressing the colon. The colon is the home site of Vata, meaning that's where Vata accumulates predominantly. We have other Vata sites in the body, like our hips and our bones, our ears, these places where Vata is going to tend to hang out. And so we will often notice Vata hanging out in those places first. So in the colon, that might be, we notice, oh, I'm getting more constipated or have irregular bowel movements. I'm not having a bowel movement every day, which in Ayurveda we say is constipated. And there's a dryness to my skin I'm noticing. So that external skin, also the internal skin, the skin of the organs are also getting dry. I notice now as I talk, the throat getting dry, like there's just a lot more dryness. So the yoga postures that support grounding, stability, we want to move slowly and mindfully. So a very rigorous power yoga practice might not be the most supportive for you at this time of year. Perhaps something like a gentle hatha flow, maybe even restorative yoga where you're supported with these bolsters and blankets and sand pillows and eye pillows. It's very important how we move the body. We want to move the body enough each day so that we do keep things moving. The lymphatic system, the respiratory system, all the systems need movement. But for you pitta types that are maybe pitta vata, I want you to be mindful of not overdoing it as you move into fall and winter. So we come back to listening to the body, honoring the body, and letting the ego take a back seat of if your story is like, I need to do more, or all of that. And when you're going against your own body's intelligence and your own state of your nervous system. And I'm not talking about sluggish energy, because when we have sluggish energy, sometimes we really do need to move and kind of be more intense in that. But what I'm talking about is depletion, fatigue, and working preventatively for that. Vata types, when they get energy, they use it, spend it, and then it's gone. So energy management is the most important thing for Vata, instead of getting a little hit of energy and being woo off to the races and then bam, crash. Okay, we don't want to live that way, because then what happens in that crash, most people reach for caffeine or sugar, all the things that are going to keep you on that roller coaster, instead of stabilizing the energy, stabilizing the prana, so that you can be more contained. Ultimately, we want to cultivate what's called ojas. Now, ojas is the result of good digestion. It takes many days for when we eat something. There are 7 different dhatus or tissue layers, and it takes 35 days to go through each of those 7 dhatus before your food gets refined into this ojas. However, if you have crappy digestion before those 7 layers that the food gets digested, it's wasted. So it's not just what we eat, right? We're so fixated in our society, like, what am I eating? What am I eating? We want to know, like, well, how am I eating? What is the state of my nervous system when I eat? Am I welcoming in the nourishment from the Divine Mother with my food? That is all going to help with the digestion, the absorption, and the transformation into this potent quality called ojas, O-J-A-S, ojas. And ojas it's related to the immune system. It's not identical to the immune system, but if we have low ojas or weakened ojas, we're not going to have a strong immune system. And if we have ama, or toxicity in the mind body, ama presents itself a lot as kapha. It can be sort of a heaviness, fatigue, sluggishness, aches, inflammation. We can have this ama in the body, and if we've got too much ama, it blocks good digestion, good absorption, and the production of this good quality ojas. Okay, so we talked about routine of eating, sleeping at the same times. These are the months, so here's some good news for you. These are the months when you can give yourself permission to sleep in more. Where we need, and we know this, right? As the days get darker, it's not so easy to get out of bed. It's like, oh gosh, it's like dark and gloomy and rainy. So this is the time of year to have a little bit longer sleep. Depending on your dosha, Vata dosha gets to sleep the most because they have the most delicate nervous system. They get the longest shavasana in yoga. Kapha types need less sleep and need to wake up earlier and get moving. But if you have a lot of Vata or are working with a Vata imbalance, overwhelm, stress, anxiety, if you notice the nervous system is dysregulated, then be gentle with yourself. Take in that sleep that you need, and make sure that you're getting to bed by 10 p.m. That's also going to affect, again, not just the hours that we sleep, but the time. So getting to bed before 10 p.m. is going to regulate your circadian rhythms. It's going to regulate your organ system. It's going to be healthier for you. So even people that maybe go to bed at 1 o'clock and wake up at 9, that, even though it's the same amount of sleep of going to bed at 10 and waking up at 6 or whatever it is, the healthiest version of sleep is going to be bed by 10. Okay, so I'm just the messenger. I'm just conveying what Ayurveda has said for thousands of years. I didn't make this up. So you can do what you will with this information. And try these things out, right? Try for yourself and see how it is for you. Okay, question. Jenny, is there a good dosha quiz to take? Yes. So most books on Ayurveda will have a dosha quiz. The book that Glynis and I wrote, Your Irresistible Life, has a dosha quiz in it. I actually would direct you, because it's easy and I think it's quite thorough, to the Banyan Botanicals dosha quiz. It's online. You just go to banyanbotanicals.com. There's a dosha quiz on there, and they've done a really good job with it. When they were creating it, they reached out and were like, hey, can you look this over and give us some feedback? And it's one of the better dosha quizzes that I've seen. Here's the thing. Dosha quizzes, you are a complex human. They are not 100% accurate. And you're also the one taking it, and you're not very subjective. I mean, you're very subjective. You're not very objective with yourself. So think of it as information, but not as a conclusion, because some people do that and they get sort of misdirected and can go on the wrong trail for many years if they do that incorrectly. It's still just a quiz. I call it the Cosmo quiz. Okay, it's not conclusive. This is a 10,000-year-old medical science. So a few questions and checking some boxes is not going to necessarily give you an accurate answer. I always say to people, if you feel called to Ayurveda and it resonates with you, find someone that you trust. Work with a practitioner that you like and that you trust, because it's an investment in yourself and an investment in your health. And the good thing about Ayurveda is when you understand the wisdom and philosophy of it, it won't go to style. Like what we're talking about today, every fall and beginning of winter, this information will apply. This won't change. So I like that about it, is it's time tested and it's not going to change because it's based on the principles of nature. All right, let's talk about food. We look at food differently in Ayurveda. There are 6 tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent. And every dosha has an affinity towards certain tastes. So the taste that will balance that dosha and the taste that will be less favorable for that dosha. We all need all 6 tastes. In fact, it is said that in every meal, to be satisfied physically, mentally, and emotionally, we need all 6 tastes. So that's really like different from the way we've been taught in our nutrition. So that in every meal we need sweet. Doesn't mean sugar. It means things like whole grains or dairy or meat, or like vegetables like carrots, beets, sweet potato is sweet taste. Okay. Sour, that could be like lemon or lime is sour. Soy sauce is sour. Fermented foods are sour. Salty, we know where we get that from. We can also get it other than just salt through like dulse and seaweed products. Some fishes are very salty. We need bitter, so things like bitter greens, leafy greens, certain herbs and spices. So we don't have to have that food, for example, in the meal. If we're like, well, how am I getting pungent? What pungent vegetables? It can be a spice. So pungent means spicy. It could be garlic or onion or ginger or cayenne pepper or cinnamon. Like all these things have pungent quality. And the more that you slow things down and pay attention to tastes and textures and colors and what your food, like, is it heavy or light? A piece of steak has very different qualities than popcorn. So popcorn, light, dry, rough, cold, airy, is the same qualities as Vata. So is that going to be beneficial or detrimental to Vata? It's going to add more Vata to Vata So if you don't want to increase your Vata, then watch that you're not having foods that are increasing to Vata. So Vata needs those warming, grounding, stabilizing, unctuous foods. It needs spices. I'm not saying it has to be spicy, but we can use spices. So at the very basic, think black pepper, right? You can go into any restaurant and you're going to be able to get black pepper. That will help with digestion. Spices are heating typically and help to break down, metabolize our food. So this is how we can start to use certain spices to support our digestion and assimilation. And it might feel a little bit overwhelming. I'm not a good cook. I don't think I'm a good cook. I don't think I cook a great varied diet. So you don't have to be an aficionado in the kitchen to work with these principles. It can be very simple. You can have maybe like 10 herbs and spices that you work with that you like, that you know how to use. This time of year, ginger, fresh ginger is incredible. It's going to support your digestion. It's got a heating quality to it. Dry ginger is way hotter. So if you've got a lot of pitta and are using dry ginger all the time, that might be too much. Fresh ginger is very powerful. Fresh turmeric, again, very powerful and healthy. That's another thing I would recommend consuming a lot through the fall and winter and into the spring actually is turmeric. And when I say a lot, I don't mean don't go crazy and overdo it. I love this product. I can't remember the brand, but it's essentially ground up turmeric. It's already ground up and it's got a little bit of salt, a little bit of coconut oil, and I take like half a teaspoon of that in the morning. And then I'm like, okay, great. I've got some good turmeric going on. It's great for inflammation. It is, anti-cancer. It's good for cleansing, we would call it. So the ama, the toxicity in the body, turmeric's going to be a gentle cleanser. It's such a powerful herb to take, and I think it's really valuable for most people. I'm not going to say everyone because everyone is different, and Ayurveda looks at everyone differently. But it's one of those ones that most people can take and do really well with. Okay, so the other thing I just want to talk briefly about stimulants, caffeine, sugar, alcohol. Vata is already hyperstimulated. The nervous system is already stimulated. Those things are going to be aggravating to Vata. Again, just the messenger, FYI. I've mentioned it. Coffee, if you're dealing with adrenal fatigue or a Vata imbalance, it's fooling you. The energy is false. It's not true energy that you're getting from that. Okay. Let me see here. So in your handout, you'll see that I've got categories of the foods. It's not, there's not every food on the planet on here, but the certain foods, the ones that are ideal for Vata or this time of year, the ones to have in small quantities and limited. I never say never, because Ayurveda isn't about restriction. It's not about saying you can't eat this or you can't do that. It's not rulesy. It might feel like there's a lot of rules. It's not. The mastery level of Ayurveda is listen to your body. The problem is we don't know how to do that. We've forgotten how to listen to our body. We've disconnected and now just have all these habits, and we have all types of food available to us. We don't actually know how to listen to our body anymore. So that's where the philosophy can be supportive, so that it can guide us back into listening of like, what is in my highest and best to eat today? Lasagna. Okay, I'm going to have that. Our body will tell us what it needs, when it needs it, if we're willing to slow down enough to listen, to ask, to be with a quieter vibration instead of our programming and conditioning. So I'm going to leave you with these lists. If you have any questions about it, don't get fanatical about it. That's no fun. And this should be fun. Life's supposed to be fun. And eating is our communion with the Divine Mother. So when we're receiving nourishment, let us receive it. Let us really embrace the bounty that life is providing us with. We have so much here in our culture typically that we've gotten very picky about food. You know, it's like we've never really experienced true hunger. And so we get picky, and then we have this sort of what happens in these like yoga and spiritual communities where we use food as a really spiritual form of an eating disorder. So don't do that. Don't go down that path of controlling your choices. That is not health. Okay, it's about listening and receiving. And if you are someone that has had a history of eating disorder, I work with a lot of people that have, it can be a really slippery slope, right? And if that's you, then hold this information lightheartedly and do what is best for you. But I like to really just teach people, focus more on the qualities of things. So no raw foods. Again, not if you're digesting it and your body's saying yes, okay. But most people in the middle of, you know, fall, early winter, dead of winter, eating hummus and crackers or like raw carrot sticks, it's not really what we're designed to do. This isn't really living in accordance with nature. Some of you with really strong Agni, digestive fire, that are really strong Pitta, maybe you can get away with it. If you live in Hawaii, different story. But for those of us who are living in cold, damp places, we need to bring in the opposite quality. So don't let the brainwashing of a salad is healthy for you. It might not be. You might not be able to digest it. And if you can't digest it, you're not receiving the nutrients from it. So the number one thing when you're thinking about and you know, figuring out your food is, am I digesting it? So notice, do I have gas, bloating, a heartburn? Do I have constipation? Do I have loose stool, diarrhea? If any of those symptoms, no, you're not digesting it. So it doesn't matter how organic, vegan, whatever you think you're doing that is good for you. If your body is not digesting it, it's not helpful. Does that make sense? And that's just a really simple way to think, like to start paying attention. Am I digesting my meals, or is there a backlash? Is my body like, oh, wow. And then people go, oh, it's just because it's beans, or it's just because it's this or that. Well, again, not ideal if we're having these kind of symptoms. And there's ways, for example, say we are cooking beans, that we use certain spices to help digest them. Okay, and this is what I love about Ayurveda. It is alchemy. It's a dance. It's going, okay, I want to eat these beans, or maybe, oh, all I have in my fridge is hummus and I'm going to eat that even though maybe it's not the best. Well, let's get some black pepper in there. Let's put in some cayenne pepper in there. Let's support our poor choice, essentially. Okay, because sometimes life happens, right? Or we're in an airport, or, well, we used to be in an airport. We are traveling, right? Where you don't have total choice over what you're eating, then making these little tweaks are going to be helpful. Okay. So Monica's, how do we integrate nutrients we normally take in other seasons, such as salads, juicing, and smoothies into fall, other than khichdi every day? Yeah, great. And I wouldn't recommend khichdi every day because you're going to get really sick of that, unless you're doing a khichdi cleanse. That's another story. It's an interesting question. So again, we look at nutrients where we're not breaking down sort of like vitamins and minerals in Ayurveda, because we're looking at the strength of this is a great question, by the way, I love this. We're looking at the strength and capacity of Agni, of the digestive fire, numero uno. Without that, doesn't matter. People have smoothies all day long. I work with clients. They're like, oh, I have a smoothie. They're all proud of themselves. And then I have a salad for lunch. Their digestion's terrible. They got gas. They're bloated all the time. And they think they're doing themselves a favor. So I would question, I guess, what you mean by like the nutrients. You can still get lots of health benefits through vegetables that are steamed, lightly cooked, roasted. So we're also seasonal creatures. If we look to our farmers markets, we will know, oh, what is in season? We're not meant to eat the same diet 365 days of the year. So that's why, when the springtime comes, this is the time when like the dandelions are up, all of the liver detoxifying produce comes out, because our body is connected to nature, and our body, that's the time to cleanse the liver naturally through nature, because the foods that we're meant to eat during the winter time are, and this is what's so fascinating, right? The grounding, nurturing root vegetables to keep us grounded. So, the ginger, the squashes, the sweet potatoes, this is what nature's giving us, saying, look, this is the best food. And isn't it interesting that it so happens to coincide with pacifying Vata? So you see, we're not meant to have the same diet year round. And when we can really listen to our digestive capacity, when we can start to understand the 6 taste theory and realize that, so say we're someone that never has sweet taste. I actually have a colleague who thought sugar's bad and sweets are bad. So for I think a decade, she cut out sugar. And then she realized she became so out of balance. She got dried up. She became really sour in nature, like her personality turned sour. So the 6 tastes are not just physical, they're mental, emotional, psychological as well. We have this languaging in our verbiage, right? If we talk with someone, oh, he's a salty dog, or salt of the earth, or she's a bit bitter, right? We talk about these 6 tastes as personalities. So if someone is bitter, maybe they've been eating kale for months because they think that's the healthiest thing, and excess bitter taste will elevate Vata. So say someone, and these are the Vata types love being vegetarian and vegan and extreme and eating just kale and smoothies and doing all this. I'm generalizing to make a point, but excess bitter taste is going to aggravate Vata. Vata's tastes to pacify are sweet, sour, and salty. So those are the main tastes for Vata to focus on, or to focus on in the fall season. Now, yes, please also include bitter, pungent, and astringent in all of your meals, but much smaller doses. Okay? So this is the time to have the squashes, the root vegetables, the roasted beets and potatoes and parsnips and turnips and everything that fall provides, that bounty, that harvest. Okay, Brenda says, I found a recipe for turmeric latte with turmeric, cinnamon, ginger, and I drink that instead of coffee. Beautiful. Yeah, great. A lot of people just like the ritual of a warm drink in the morning, so that's a great option, is to make something like a turmeric latte. And if you really, have that addiction to the coffee and you're like, I'm not cutting it out, but I'd like to cut it down, have a smaller cup. Start to kind of wean yourself off. Ayurveda also says add cardamom to your coffee, and that's going to help to mitigate some of the negative effects. I don't know. I'm not a coffee drinker. I never have been. So I don't have a lot of compassion for people that are trying not to drink coffee. I just can't understand. I can't understand it. So I'll work on that. I'll work on my compassion for people trying to not drink coffee. But I can appreciate how difficult it might be if we're addicted to that substance, right? And that's really hard. So I jest, but in all seriousness, slowly, right? Take a smaller cup of it, or add a little more water and less caffeine, whatever it takes. Or some people are just best to just go cold turkey. Everyone's going to be a little bit different, how you interact and how you know yourself and what will be most supportive. It's not about good or bad. And I really want to convey that something is right for everybody and nothing is right. No, something is right for somebody. I'm going to mess this up. I'm going to just tell it in my words. The essence of it is that anything could be medicine, depending on who it's for, when it's taken, how much it's taken. And anything could be poison. So what might be medicine for me might be poison to you, and vice versa. And this is what the beauty of Ayurveda is, understanding our uniqueness is the key to good health. So what I'm saying today, yes, this is general. So we need to be more specific, especially if we're struggling with dis-ease or illness or symptoms. Most people can take this seasonal approach and run with it. Okay, it can serve you so well to just start to bring in a few of these concepts and things. I'm not asking you to do everything that I'm talking about today. That probably won't happen, and that's okay, and that would be a lot. So pick the things that feel good. Some of you I know have been studying Ayurveda for some time. So maybe it's like, okay, how can I refine from here? What's my next best step in refinement? Is it just to remember, oh yeah, okay, this is what I'm moving into. This is the season. Okay, I'm going to get out my crock pot. I'm going to make some stews and soups and things that are going to be really nourishing and grounding and warming. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about essential oils. I know some of you love them and some of you couldn't care less, and that's totally okay. It's just one more tool. The essential oils that are going to be beneficial to Vata are so because of their qualities and their taste. So they're going to be the sweeter oils. They're going to be some of them sour, some of the citrusy oils, well, we don't have salty essential oils, but they're going to be sweet. They're going to be more of the sour. They're going to be essential oils that are grounding and stabilizing, nourishing, and also comforting and soft. Because Vata is rough, if you think wind blowing on something all day long, it starts to dry it out and it becomes rough. Vata needs softness. It likes cashmere and soft clothing and soft conversation. Like Vata doesn't like bright lights and sharp, loud, aggressive noises. It can be very too much, can feel almost violent to someone of Vata nature or with a Vata imbalance. So monitoring what we take in through the five senses is another form of self-care for Vata. Vata can be very sensitive to news, to social media, to sounds, to textures, to tastes. So the essential oils that I've listed here are some that are going to be supportive to balancing Vata. There's different ways you can use these. You can add a few drops in a bath. Make sure that you add a little bit of oil in there as well in your bath. That will help to absorb. You can add them in a diffuser, those diffusers that you buy at the store, and you add a little bit of water and essential oil that sends sort of the steam molecule into the air and diffuses the oils into your environment. A steam inhalation, this is very good, especially if you tend to congestion, where you would boil some water, you'd put that water in a bowl, and maybe you just want a calming steam inhalation. You're going to put some lavender in there, maybe a little bit of rose, drop of sandalwood, just something, and then you're going to take a towel over your head, cover your head in the bowl, open your mouth just so slightly, and take deep inhalations. Sometimes this is recommended medicinally if we have cough or lungs, and we would use different essential oils for those things, more like eucalyptus or rosemary, these kinds of things to help clear out congestion. But you can do a steam inhalation just to breathe in the lavender or chamomile or ylang-ylang. These really just beautiful smells, you can bring them into your body. Essential oils are wonderful because they work with prana vata. It's a sub-dosha of vata, and it comes right into through the olfactory senses and works with stimulating the brain and opening up the prana. So it's subtle, right? And some of you will be more attuned to feeling the subtleties of these things, and that's okay. So rose, oh my gosh, rose, such a beautiful essential oil, very expensive essential oil if you buy a pure rose, but you can get rose auto. Vetiver is a very earthy and grounding essential oil. Jatamansi it's becoming extinct, so I don't know how I feel about, maybe I shouldn't be recommending that, but it is very, again, very earthy. It smells like dirt, in fact. I kind of like it. We've got cardamom, chamomile, cinnamon, clary sage, frankincense, geranium, ginger, jasmine, lavender, lemongrass, myrrh, neroli. There's something for everybody. I know that on this list, you'll find at least one of these scents that you like. Sweet orange, vanilla, ylang-ylang, sandalwood. You can also add these oils. We talked about the Abhyanga, the body oil earlier. You could add these oils to your massage oil if you wanted to jazz it up a little bit. Now you'll find if you're working with sesame oil has a pretty strong smell. And if you're choosing some of the citrus oils, you want to be careful because citrus oil directly on the skin is damaging. So if it isn't a carrier oil, it's going to be okay. But if you're sensitive, if your skin is sensitive, you just want to do like a patch test to make sure, even if it's in a carrier oil, that you're like, okay, that's okay for me. For massage oils, I wouldn't tend to put those citrus oils in. I would choose things like rose, geranium, lavender, chamomile, cardamom even, frankincense, ylang-ylang, vanilla. And you can play around with those combinations. If you are making your own oil blends, less is more, okay? So if you start putting like, I'm gonna put 6 different essential oils in here, start with 2, maybe 3, because if you start bringing too many oils in, there's high note. It's like wine. There's like high notes and low notes, and if you don't know what you're doing, you can end up making kind of a stinky, not so great smell. So it can be as simple, right? It can just be lavender. It can just be geranium. It's all good. Okay. Monica asked about matcha. I'm not sure what about matcha your question is, Monica, but feel free to ask at the end when I open up for the Q&A, or just type in more specifically what your question is or what your curiosity is around that. Okay, I'm going to pause and let's go to questions. I've been talking a lot. Matcha, is it overstimulating? Yeah, my understanding that matcha still has quite a bit of caffeine. It's got a lot of other health benefits, right? Some of these things, again, you need to know for yourself. It's not saying like green tea is bad because it has caffeine in it. No, there's lots of different kind of ways to look at it. But yeah, matcha is also stimulating. So you'll find for yourself what your degree is of stimulants. Like I can't drink coffee, even green tea. Maybe I could have that like at noon, but if I had that later in the afternoon, it would be overstimulating for me. So you need to feel into what works for you individually. Brenda says, I put my essential oils in Epsom salt, let it sit a bit, and then add to the bath. Is that okay? Great. Yeah, you can even make, and we have this in our book, In Your Irresistible Life, some bath scrubs where you get Epsom salt or sea salt. You add oil into that and essential oils, and you make a nice bath scrub with the oil. And I would say, just in the spirit of Vata pacifying, if you're using Epsom salt, which can be very relaxing, can help with sleep, the magnesium in that, add some oil to your bath as well to help absorb the Epsom salts. Okay, it doesn't have to be a lot. I usually just like a teaspoon or something, just a little bit of oil. Disclaimer is, yeah, your bathtub's going to get oily. So that's the downfall. You have to kind of stay on top of that if you want to keep that nice. Okay, so let's, Brenda said, I'm freezing on her. I think that might be on your end. Hopefully we don't lose each other. Natasha, suggestion for tea alternative for a very dry Vata. Do you mean black tea, Natasha? Alternative from black tea? And feel free. Okay, so let's do some questions. You're welcome to unmute yourself. You can type in. It's sometimes easier just to unmute and have a conversation about the question, because usually, and this is the way it works with Ayurveda, the answer is it depends, or I have more questions so that I can answer your question. So Natasha, where are you? Did you want to unmute yourself and ask me more about that?
Hi, yeah, I've heard that tea is astringent and dry.
Yes.
And I usually, I'll go for an herbal chai in the in the fall. But I don't know, is it still considered drying and astringent? And that might, because I'm really trying to be more mindful of all the things that I do to prepare myself for fall, because I've been like super dry and not happy in the fall and winter. So I'm really trying to prepare better each year.
Great. So yes, it's still going to be astringent and drying. And here's again the alchemy where, so if it's chai, I'm assuming there's other spices in it, maybe some cardamom and black pepper and clove and those kinds of things, which is great. Some of those also, say something like cinnamon, can be really drying too. Some of these spices are drying. Have you ever had that? Like maybe you make cinnamon toast, or I make cinnamon toast, and if you put too much cinnamon, it actually is like, has this really drying feeling and astringent and sweet. So things have different tastes. What you could do if you're really committed to your chai is you could add, say, more like of a milky almond milk, like creamy almond milk, and some ghee. That's going to help to make it less dry. So a little bit of teaspoon of ghee. Ghee is clarified better for those of you who that's a new term for. We use a lot of ghee in Ayurveda, and that helps to lubricate us internally. Ghee is wonderful, and it's pretty easy to digest, and it's tridoshic. So I would add some ghee and some almond milk to that, or switch to a herbal tea. And again, you want, like, there's certain herbal teas that are going to be drying. Things like I find hibiscus tea and rooibos tea super drying. So it's a dance. And then you have to look at the rest of your life. Like if that's the only thing that you're doing that is, you know, drying and astringent, well, maybe it's not a big deal. If a lot of your choices, like say you're having salads and smoothies and beans and having a lot of dry astringent things, then then it's one more thing that's going to amplify it.
Well, I know I am a tea drinker, like even all year round, and I'm already noticing my skin drying out. So just wondering if there's like, I went from a green tea and now I'm moving over to chai, and just, I don't know, just questioning, you know, why am I doing that? Maybe there's something else. Yeah. I
think definitely adding the ghee is going to be important. And even like turmeric can be very drying, right? It's very astringent. So people with the turmeric latte can be great. But if they're similar to you, Natasha, and are struggling with increased dryness, then you need to have some ghee in there. You need to have some healthy oils. A lot of teas are drying. Yeah, a lot of teas, not just the black teas, but like a lot of teas are astringent in quality. But I would say adding some form of milk, adding the ghee, I would start with that and see. And maybe you have once in a while, instead of even having tea, you're going to have like warm water with some lemon to counter one of those tea drinks in a day or something like that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Linda, any options for breakfast staying within Ayurveda? Great question. And so here's the thing. Just think, what would be warming, grounding, stabilizing? So it could be something like oatmeal with some nuts and with some spices, some cinnamon, cardamom, maybe some sprinkle of flaxseed or hemp seeds, some oil. I would definitely get some oil in there, some cut up dates perhaps. Typically in Ayurveda, we say keep fruits separate from your meals. Again, it depends on your digestion, and if the fruit is cooked into something, it will be easier to digest. So some people love oatmeal, and that can feel really grounding and stabilizing for them. But I will often, you know, encourage people to include some protein and fats in there, especially if you're starting your day that way. You know, Linda, it could be eggs on toast with some ghee on your bread, some pepper on the eggs. I think something that's very underestimated and talked about is actually having other kinds of foods for breakfast than the breakfast foods that we've been trained. You can eat anything for breakfast. And I think we've been so conditioned to think it has to be like cereal or toast or this and that. Get creative. If you're a meat eater, maybe you have chicken for breakfast or sausage for breakfast. If you're a vegetarian, maybe you're going to have avocado and soup for breakfast. You know, if we get out of our idea of what we think breakfast is, that can be helpful. You can heat up leftovers from last night's dinner. It can be a stir fry for breakfast or curry, or some of you might be thinking, that's disgusting. I don't feel like any of those things first thing in the morning. So eat according to, you know, what feels good. Also, oh yeah, Jenny says congee for breakfast. Great. Congee is all, it's like the Chinese version of khichdi almost. It's a really cooked down rice, and very good for digestion. That's a great way to start the day, especially if your digestion is weaker, more difficult. Then you want to support with things that you can digest easily. Okay. So go beyond what you think breakfast is. Start to play around with things that you might eat for lunch or dinner, and know for yourself what your digestion is. If your Vata is high, meaning, okay, then don't have dry toast or rice cakes or cereal with cold milk. Like those things are going to aggravate your Vata right out of the gate in the day. For me, I'm predominantly Pitta, but I have a lot of Vata too. And what I've noticed for me, I was vegetarian for over 15 years. And then when I started studying Ayurveda, I discovered that for my constitution, for my blood sugar, for my body, that meat protein, actually, I feel better. I don't actually really love to cook meat, or I could kind of do without it if my body didn't work so well with it. But lately I've been trying to have meat for breakfast. And so for Vata types, that can be very stabilizing to have protein and fat first thing in the day. So I used to eat oatmeal all the time, but what I discovered is it spikes my blood sugar and I feel unstable with it, even when I add in all the nuts and the hemp seeds and the chia seeds and all the stuff. So that was something that just took me years to discover, because again, I'm thinking, well, oatmeal's so good and it's grounding for Vata. For me specifically, I'm not saying for you, but I just want to bring your awareness to that. So anything that, you know, Ayurveda tells you, or anybody tells you, your naturopath or your homeopath or your Chinese medicine doctor, anybody, you have to test it out for yourself and really feel into, how is this affecting me? You might create a food journal and take note of that for a week or two and write down what you're eating, the times, how you're feeling physically and emotionally. Okay, and that will give you an idea of, oh, I wait too long before I eat, and I get kind of irritated because I've waited too long, or wow, I eat irregular schedules, and that moves my moods around as well, become irregular. Lori says, what about leftover foods? How long should one keep cooked food in the fridge before you throw it out? What about uncooked food that has mold, like cheese? Can you cut it off? Food's still okay. Great question. This is something that Ayurveda does talk about, actually. It's a personal thing. So I'm going to tell you what Ayurveda says, and then I'm going to tell you like what my mother taught me. My mother would say, just cut off the mold and eat the cheese. Like that's what we would do, because you're not going to waste it. So be it. Ayurveda talks about leftovers not being great because it loses prana. The food loses prana. What we're actually receiving when we eat food is prana. It's beyond nutrients, minerals, vitamins, all of that. It's prana, it's energy. So if we're digesting it well, then we're going to have great energy. If the food is, say you pick a carrot fresh out of the garden, that's going to have way different quality prana than carrots from a tin. Yes, we can all kind of eat and taste different, all of that. There's more vital pranic energy from the carrot out of your garden than the tin. But let's get real, right? We're all not organic gardeners. So what do? Blessing your food before you eat it is going to increase the potency of prana that you receive. Being mindful when you eat is going to increase the potency of the prana, the connection, the relationship to your food. Here's what I do personally with leftovers. If I cook something today, I'm going to eat it tomorrow. I might even eat it the next day. Beyond that, I'm going to compost it. And it depends on what the food is, but that's for me. Some strict, Ayurvedic, someone might be like, never eat any leftovers. I also am like, I don't want to throw out food. It doesn't feel good to me. And I also think when these Ayurvedic philosophies were created thousands of years ago, they didn't have refrigerators. So yes, if you didn't eat your meal that night, it might be putrid the next day. Now we have refrigerators. We have ways to preserve our food a little bit longer than we would have 5,000 years ago, or even a couple hundred years ago. So I think we have to understand to the context of the teachings and make it practical, but just know for yourself when you're looking like, okay, what day was this put in the fridge? And ask your body, is it in my highest and best to have this? Your body's either going to feel light and right or feel like, yeah. Okay. And then the more that you honor the feeling, your intuition, your body's knowing, the more you increase your self-respect, your self-worth, your self-acceptance and self-love. It's all connected. Okay, great question. Yeah, and Linda says, good idea, away from the normal breakfast. Never thought of that. Yeah, experiment with it. Have chili for breakfast. Have burritos for breakfast. Have soup or stew. Yeah, experiment with it. And I have found when I actually have vegetables for breakfast, so say I would make, I'm like, oh, I'm going to have some eggs and I'm going to steam some vegetables and put some ghee on them, some salt and pepper, and maybe I'll have some toast with ghee or something like that. When I have vegetables, protein and fat in the morning, set up, it's gold. And then it also feels good to have some vegetables first thing to be like, oh, wow. Breakfast, typically, it feels like our carbs for most people. Carbs are going to turn into sugar. So having protein and fat is going to help to stabilize your blood sugar along with that. Okay. Great. Any other questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat. Do you feel that you understand, did I go through the yoga and pranayama practices well enough for you to understand if you're doing a home practice? The forward folds, lying on your back, knees into the chest. If you're doing standing postures, hold them, don't move so quickly through, holding the posture, breathing long, steady, calm breaths, warm room, longer shavasana, yin yoga, restorative yoga, hatha yoga. These things are going to be supportive. Okay. Okay. About the tridoshic fall khichdi. So that's one of the recipes in your handout. Nancy, you'll be getting that today. Sorry. The question is, what is asafoetida, and can you use brown rice or quinoa instead of white rice? I find white hard to digest. Interesting. Okay. So first question, what is asafoetida, right? Like, what is that? That's weird. Sometimes that's called hing. Hing is also known as asafoetida. So if you went to the Indian grocer, then you could probably get asafoetida. It's very pungent. So I made a mistake once of inviting guests over and thinking like more is better. And so the recipe called for asafoetida. So I thought, oh, more of this is better. Asafoetida is a carminative, meaning it helps to dispel gas and bloating. But let me tell you, more is not better. It tasted terrible. So I made this dish for guests with lots of asafoetida, and it was terrible. It's very strong. So you can find that as hing or asafoetida. If you do get gas or bloating, that can be a really good spice in, the amount suggested in your recipes. Okay. Can we use brown rice or quinoa instead of white rice for the khichdi, which is the Ayurvedic superfood? It's easy to digest. It's got our rice, our legumes, our vegetables, and our spices and our ghee in there. So the answer is you can do whatever you want. And Ayurveda says that white rice is the easiest to digest. Brown rice is heavier. It's got more grit to it. So yeah, there might be more nutrients, but if we can't digest that, we're not going to absorb them. So that's why for khichdi, which is a food that is given to those who are sick or have symptoms or are doing a cleanse, that's typically why we say white rice. But yes, go ahead, use brown rice if that feels good for your body and you can digest it. Same thing with quinoa. It's just understanding everything has a different property. That's all. Brown rice is heavier. white rice is lighter. It's a different perception than how we look at foods in the West, right? Of like, white rice has no nutrient value or whatever concepts we've been told. We think, well, what's the digestive capacity, like ability? And that's more important to us because we know if we're not digesting, then we're creating ama, which is toxicity. And if we're creating ama and not digesting, we're not creating ojas, O-J-A-S. That's the quality, the energy that comes through our food, that once it goes down through those 7 tissue layers of the body, this takes many, many days, 35 days per layer, then eventually we get this like little drop of ojas, this nectar of immunity. Question, beef bone broths are the big trend. What's my opinion? Again, it depends for who. I think they can be really great for Vata, really great for people, and not necessarily beef. If you're like, oh, I don't have beef, you can now get chicken bone broth. These things are going to be unctuous. They bring in oil. They're going to go to the marrow of our bones. So they are good for the nervous system, for Maja Dhatu in Ayurveda. I think they can be really wonderful for healing the microbiome of the gut. So that's great for people that take meat and this time of year. You can make even like a little cup and drink it like tea even. There's fancy hipster shops that you can go into now, and that's what they're serving as drinks, is like bone broth with turmeric for $10. So you can get all these things nowadays, depending where you live. I actually think that bone broths are great. Look, it's the marrow of the animal's bone that's been stewed down for a long time, if it's done correctly. You can do this on your own, right? If you buy or have a chicken and then you have all the stock left over. My mom used to do this. I thought it was revolting. I'm like, that's the grossest thing I've ever seen. And now I get it. It's like, you don't waste any part of it. And it's actually the densest part of the bone in the marrow is the deepest nutrient. So why are we just throwing that out? I think it's great. And it's great that it's, become trendy, but like anything, don't overdo it. Listen to your body, right? But it can be very grounding and very stabilizing, and lots of nutrient dense coming into the body that way. Where do you buy split mung beans? Good question. They are hard to come by. Split mung beans are the ones that we use for khichdi. They're the yellow beans. You can use the green mung beans. They're harder to digest because they're whole. They have like the husk, I don't know if that's the term, husk still on them, the green part. So yes, you can use the whole mung beans. They are going to be harder to digest. Again, lots of nutrients, all of that. The split mung beans, I go to an Asian grocer and get them in Vancouver. It's very difficult to find organic split mung beans. I can easily find organic red lentils, orange lentils, but split mung beans, organic, are difficult to find. I think in the US, you guys probably have a better chance at that, and maybe through Banyan Botanicals. They have khichdi sets where you can just order a whole, they'll send you everything you need for your khichdi. So if you want to try it out and it's new to you, they're only delivering in the United States, but if you're American, and you might want to check them out. Okay, yeah, suggestions for Vancouver people, famous foods or Whole Foods. So you can check out those places. All right, what other questions do you have? What's going to support you this fall? We've talked about daily routines, self-care routines, food, the tastes, the qualities of foods. We've talked about essential oils, and we've talked about yoga and pranayama practices. Oh, let me go a little bit more, because we talked about the alternate nostril breathing, which is very balancing. It's tridoshic, great for everybody, all times of the year. Other pranayama practices are going to be practices that are warming. So something like Kapalbhati is where we're, so you'll feel that that's a heating pranayama, which is good because Vata is cold. However, it's also stimulating. So depending on the individual, if someone had high Vata, I would be like, stay away from Kapalbhati or Bhastrika, because that, the energy, you're feeling it, it's coming up. Kapalbhati means skull shining. We're literally shining the skull with the prana, with the energy. So it's good to warm up the body, but if you start to feel dizzy or lightheaded, it's going to be too much for you. So see for yourself, right? Practice these things. Of course, you would do that on an empty stomach, not if you're pregnant. And if you have like hot flashes, again, try it out, right? And you'll see it's like it's going to increase that heat pretty quickly. So you might discover this isn't the practice for me, or you might discover that it is because you've got enough kapha to support that. Like everyone is quite different in that. Ujjayi pranayama, where we're just narrowing the epiglottis and we're making that sweet sound. I don't know if you can hear that from where you are, but that I find can either be heating or cooling pranayama, depending how it's done. So play around with that. It's a very stabilizing pranayama, which is good for Vata, right? That consistent, even when you're, say, doing work at the computer or driving your car, you can practice Ujjayi. That's the beauty of it. You can just, it's a very soothing practice. Don't strain, don't force it. You know, you've probably heard that yoga teacher cue, like make the sound so the person beside you can hear it. Don't do that. No, it should not be forced, because anytime we're constricting the epiglottis to that degree and forcing that sound, we're creating strain in the nervous system. The whole point with our pranayama practice is to unwind a dysregulated nervous system. And we're trying to find what's the breathing practice that is going to support me. So please don't strain. Please don't force that sound so your neighbor can hear it. This is a different, more subtle quality that we're wanting to work with. For meditations for Vata, because Vata can be so etheric, air and ether, the beauty of that, we can kind of tune into that cosmic sense in a greater way, but we don't want to get lost in space, right? We don't want to like go out so far that we never return home. So for Vata, staying in your body, actually grounding meditations. Remember at the beginning of our yoga practice today, I invited you to imagine roots coming down from your sitting bones, from your pelvic floor, rooting into the earth, grounding you. Those types of visualizations and meditations are going to be more supportive to Vata. And again, this is very individual. If you might have a lot of Vata and be able to handle those sort of cosmic meditations and expansive meditations and still feel good. You'll know that your yoga practice served you well and was the right one for you if you come out feeling grounded, balanced, calm. If you're feeling more irritated, if you're feeling more anxious, then either what has happened is you've been doing practices that are not supportive for your constitution, or simply something has come to the surface because the space has been created for you to be with it. And again, you'll know through more consistent practice of your yoga which that is. Is it that these practices are not supportive to me, or is it that I'm actually relaxing enough that the deeper layers are rising to bring my attention to them? Okay. I was teaching, had a student once, and she was in the yoga teacher training program that I taught at Langara College here for years. She wasn't in it for years. I taught it for years, and she was in it one time. And then she came to a conference and took a session that I was teaching there. And at the end of the conference, she came up and she said, I get it now. She said, I have never realized why she would go to yoga. She'd go to like vinyasa or flow class, and her anxiety would go through the roof. And then after understanding Ayurveda, she realized that vinyasa flow, that sort of dynamic flow was aggravating her anxiety. And she realized through the Ayurvedic understanding what she had to do to ground, to balance, that she needed more restorative, that she needed more slow, mindful, calming practice, not jumping, pumping, and headstands and all the stuff that was creating a lot more anxiety within her. All right, other questions? Feel free to just unmute yourself or type in the chat.
Melanie, you froze on me when you said something about chia seeds. What, can you repeat what that was you said? Because I missed it. You were frozen.
About chia seeds. I think the
thought.
only thing I said about chia seeds was maybe adding them into oatmeal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Chia seeds are great. You know, they kind of scrub out the intestines in a good way. What I would say, like a lot of times the chia seed recipes are, you know, recommended you put that in like coconut milk or have it like a cold pudding kind of thing. This is not the greatest season to be having like a cold chia seed pudding, but you could try warming that up and making it almost like a warm tapioca pudding in that kind of vein with adding some spices. And if it were me, what I would do is I'd soak the chia seeds overnight in some almond milk, and then I would make that into a warm pudding. And in the morning I'd add saffron and cardamom, and I'd add some cinnamon, and maybe at the end put some hemp seeds into it, but I would take it warm, not cold. Yeah. And you'll know, right? Like my body, so in Vancouver this last week, it turned instantly into autumn. And my body, like I did not want salads. I did not want raw foods. Like it just, my body's like, no way. I want soups. I want pastas. I want heating, grounding things. And then we're meant to kind of get a little wave of summer again this week. And I always just observe and watch, right? Like in the past, what has happened, as soon as like we get another day of like 24 degrees, my body's going to want something different. I'll be like, oh gosh, I need something different. It can adjust that fast. It depends. So the most important thing that I can convey is to listen to your body. What are the signals from your body? We've been taught so much about eating and about health and what's healthy, what's not, that isn't necessarily going to be right for you, like through social media, through our culture, through, you know, salad is healthy, just that simply, or smoothies are healthy. And in Ayurveda, we look deeper. We ask the questions, you know, what season, what time of day, even for who, what is that person's prakruti, their original constitution? What is their vikruti, their current state? If we don't ask those questions, we cannot at any time say that something is going to be good for everybody, because it's not. All of you here today are going to need something different. But start with the qualities and see, okay, am I needing something heating or cooling right now? Do I need something heavy or light? It can be very like simple. And then you look to the spices. You can start simply, right? Black pepper, a little bit of salt. Okay, I've got my lemon for my sour. Okay, I'm going to put a pinch of cayenne pepper in these mashed potatoes. Or say you have something like heavy and cool and damp like cheese. Again, how can you, maybe you make macaroni and cheese for lunch. Okay, well that's like, it's heating, but it's heavy and it's thick. So what do I need to help digest that? Oh, I'm going to put some black pepper in there. Yeah, maybe even a pinch of cayenne. I'm trying to think what else would taste good with that. But you get the idea, right? We can use these herbs and spices in that way. This is where typically in Indian cooking, they cooked in, they had their turmeric. They didn't need to go buy some separate product to take turmeric each day. They had it cooked into their meals, and that included the black pepper, which activates the turmeric even more. They had their cumin and their coriander and their fennel and their fenugreek in the curry. That all was helping to digest the whole meal then and there. It's built into the design of it. And now we're like all fumbling around like, oh, how do we eat? How do we cook? How do we understand this? Because we haven't been, we don't have a deeper understanding of the alchemy of food. You know, depending where we're from and what our ancestors taught us, and depending where we're from and what our ancestors taught us will determine what types of foods we, you know, we're told or we're taught or we're given as children, and what we are kind of conditioned to think is healthy or unhealthy, and all of it. There's a lot to it. A question, can you speak a little bit more about constipation? What, how much can I eat more of to help elimination? Okay, great. So there's two types of constipation. One is Vata type. Vata type constipation is where the stool is strained, forced, more like rabbit pebbles, dry, infrequent, and maybe you don't have a bowel movement for a day or a couple days or 3 days, God forbid. In Ayurveda, if we're not having a bowel movement every day, that is considered constipation. We want what we're putting in, the waste of it, to go out. And if that cycle isn't happening daily, we're going to get clogged up. We're going to create ama, toxicity, physical, mental, emotional ama. Our mind, emotions are related to our elimination. Are you able to let go? Is there so much worrying up here about the future that the body, the energy is moving this way, not this way? That's why the practices from our yoga posture this morning focus on apana vayu, the downward moving force. So things like squatting yoga postures are really good, where we're bending the knees in to massage the colon, to help remind ourselves it's safe to live in this body, it's safe to let go. If there is a subconscious belief system that it's not, it's going to be difficult to eliminate every day when we're holding on to something. I've worked with clients who I asked them about their childhood, and they're like, oh, well, I was like one of 5 kids, and I always had to wait in line. That we had one bathroom, and we had like 7 people in the house. So the kids waiting in line, they became constipated from being a child. Or maybe, they never felt comfortable having a bowel movement if they weren't at home, like if they were at school and they had to, and so they didn't. I had a client who, she was a nurse for most of her adult life, and so she was on these night shifts and just couldn't have a bowel movement when she wanted because she's like on these shifts. She ended up getting colon cancer. Ayurveda, we would say a direct correlation to those two things. When we are not following the natural urges of the body, if we're preventing that, whether it's sneezing, elimination, ejaculation, if we are somehow going against those natural urges, we will create dis-ease. So there's the dry constipation, which is related to Vata. The other kind of constipation is more Kapha, where it's more like sluggish constipation. So just to distinguish between those two, I'm going to talk about the Vata constipation here, which many people get, or they get when they travel because there's change, right? Which increases the Vata. Or they're not comfortable going to the bathroom on the airplane, like who is, right? But if that goes on, we're going to create disturbance. There is a formula called Triphala in Ayurveda, which means 3 fruits. It's got Amalaki, Bibitaki, and Haritaki in it. And those that formula is a very gentle detoxifier. It cleanses the digestive tract, and it's not habit forming. So it's not like some of those habit forming things that you can buy where it maybe helps you eliminate, but then you become addicted to it. So Triphala is different. It's just 3 fruits. The other thing to help with elimination would be to have like some stewed prunes at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, to help with the morning transit time. Also to help with elimination, no cold drinks. It's going to contract everything, right? Raw food, cold drinks. So we want to get enough roughage and fiber, but we want to release. Yes, magnesium can help, magnesium citrate. You need to just experiment with that. And for some people taking magnesium for sleep, you might be like, oh, well, now this is giving me loose stools if it's taking too much. So everyone is a little bit different. Getting proper oils in your diet. If you don't have enough oils internally, things will dry up. Your colon will be dry. So we often think of hydration, right, as water. Oh, I need to drink more water if I'm constipated. Well, we actually, yes, we need to be hydrated properly, but we also have to be internally oiled. So making sure you're getting enough healthy oils in your diet so that your inner skin of your organs isn't dried out. Okay, the mind has a direct relationship to the body, to the colon, and Vata being directly related to the nervous system. So any kind of stress, whether it's conscious or subconscious, is going to affect your elimination. So if you're constipated, it is actually, you know, a really important thing to look at, because over time that will create a greater disturbance and eventually possibly a disease. So we don't want that. We want to really pay attention to having daily healthy bowel movements, ideally first thing in the morning, sort of the consistency of a ripe banana. These are ideal bowel movement scenarios in Ayurveda. So we talk a lot about bowel movements in Ayurveda. So hopefully that helps with that question. Yeah, the other thing I would just look at, if there is the diet Vata pacifying or not? Are there too many raw things, salads, dry things, astringent foods? Those things are all gonna, so beans are very astringent. So things like hummus, chickpeas, legumes, black beans, all of that is gonna be drying and like tightens the tissues. Okay. Linda says, very helpful session, lots to continue learning, love it. Awesome. Yeah, there's so much, right? So don't get overwhelmed, because that's just your Vata going out of control. Just pick one or two things from our class today and say, okay, I'm going to start with this. I'm going to start with just thinking about having more warm foods as we move into fall. Or I'm going to start thinking about, okay, what are some spices? Maybe I'm going to choose 3 spices to work with in my cooking this week. Or I'm going to try this oil massage for my body. Or I'm going to commit to doing the alternate nostril breathing every day before bed to help with my sleep. Okay. Oh, with that, one thing that I'll just mention too, the body oil massage, if you haven't done it, or for whatever reason still want some benefits for your sleep, you can oil the soles of your feet before bedtime. Okay. I just keep a bottle of oil beside my bed. I don't go and heat it up baby bottle style. Again, this is just one of my personal hacks. I warm it up in my hands, massage it into my feet, slip some old cotton socks on, and that helps to bring the energy of Vata that gets spun up here down to the feet so that you can sleep better. And when you sleep better, when you get good proper sleep, Vata lowers, decreases, imbalances. But unfortunately, one of the signs of high Vata is insomnia or sleeplessness. All right. Has this been helpful for you? You have things that you can take away that you can actually use in your life. That's really important to me, is that it's practical for us in our real lives. Pauline says, thank you. Great information. Lovely yoga class. Awesome. Well, I want to acknowledge you all for creating the time to be here and to watch the replay. And my pure intention is, like, let this be integrated into your life.